If you don't pay your invoices on time, people are not going to want to work with you. So I created this automated invoice tracker to make sure you never miss an invoice. If you haven't seen the overview showing how the invoice tracker works, make sure to go back and watch that because this is the full tutorial showing how to build it. The first thing we'll do is create a brand new spreadsheet, and you can do so by going to File, New, and we're going to rename this spreadsheet whatever you want. I'll rename mine as Invoice Tracker Tutorial. You can exit out of the table pop-up over there to the right, and then we're going to rename the tab as Pending Invoices. This tab name does matter, so make sure that you put it exactly like that. Then we'll select columns A through I, go to Format, Alternating Colors, and you can select whichever color scheme you want to use. If you want to change any of the colors, you can change those down below. So now I have a dark blue header and alternating blue and white going down. I'm going to change the font color to white to make it easier to read. I'm going to change it to bold, make it a little bit bigger, make it centered, make the text wrapped, and vertically aligned. All right, now that it's a little bit easier to read, in cell A1, I'm going to type Invoice ID, B1 Company, C1 Amount, D1 Invoice Date, E1 Due Date, F1 Description, G1 Days Until Due, H1 Category, and I1 Status. Now I'm going to right-click on the tab to duplicate it, and we're going to rename this new tab as Past Invoices. And once again, the name of the tab does matter. And now we're going to go to cell G1 and change the header to Payment Date instead. Now we're going to go back to the Pending Invoices tab. And the first thing we're going to do is add a drop-down under Status. So I'm going to select a few rows, go to Insert, Drop-Down. I'm going to change the end of the rows I selected to be the end of column I. For the first option, I'm going to put Paid and make that green. Then I'm going to change the color to yellow for the second option and make that pending. And then for the third option, I'll change the color to orange and put hold. And obviously you can change whatever colors you want. The only thing that needs to be the same is paid. So once I save that, you should be able to click on one of those drop downs and see exactly what those options are that you put in. All right, so now we need to do category, but before we do that, we're going to do a drop down from a list. So we need to add a new tab and name it Worksheet. Then in cell A30, I'm going to put the word category. And then you'll need to select the cells for however long you want the category list to be. Then we'll go to Format, Alternating Colors, select whatever color scheme you want, then hit Done. And to make it look even more like a table, I'm going to add borders, and that's all we need. All right, so next thing we want to do is go back to our Pending Invoices tab. Select H2 down just a few cells, and then go to Insert Dropdown. And we're going to select Dropdown from a range, change the end to H2:H, select the 4 boxes to select the range, go back to our worksheet, and select cells A31 all the way through the end of the table that you created. And now once we hit Done, we can exit out of the editor and go to our Pending Invoices tab, and you'll see that nothing is there. That's because there is nothing listed in our worksheet. But if we were to add different categories, so for example, I'm just putting this is a test, but obviously you would put real categories. If I go back to the Pending Invoices tab, you'll see those options now listed in that dropdown. And if for some reason you have them listed twice, don't worry, it will only show up once. Now we're going to embed a formula into our header. So I'm going to click on G1 and type equals, open parentheses, quote, put the header name, quote, semicolon, array formula, open parentheses. If open parentheses is blank, open parentheses, E2:E, close parentheses, comma, comma, E2:E minus today, open parentheses, close parentheses, close parentheses, close parentheses, close curly brace. And if you did it right, it should be blank because there is nothing listed in column E for dates. I'm going to go ahead and test this out. So I'm going to select all of column E, go to data, data validation, is valid date. And I'm going to change the validation range from starting with E1 to E2, then hit Done. And now that we have the validation in there, all we have to do to select a date is double click on the cell and a pop-out calendar will appear to make it super easy. So if I were to select different dates, you'll see that the calculation in column G will update automatically based on how many dates it's been from today to that date. I filmed this on September 12th for reference, and everything looks to be working properly. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the due dates and select all of column G, go to Format, Conditional Formatting. I'm going to change G1 to G2. Then I'm going to use the drop down to select less than 0. I'll change the background fill color to red and the text color to white, then hit add another rule. I'm going to change the drop down to be is equal to 0. And I'm going to make this orange, then click add another rule. And now I'm going to change the dropdown from is equal to less than or equal to, and change the 0 to a 7. Change the background color to yellow, and the text color to black. Then I'll hit add another rule, greater than, leave it as 7, change the background color to green, and hit done. So now if the value is less than 0, it'll be red. If it's equal to 0, it'll be orange. If it's less than or equal to 7, it'll be yellow. And if it's greater than 7, it will be green. And if multiple conditions are true, whichever one is listed first on this list will take priority. So now we can go back to our due date and double click on the cell and select different dates. And we'll want to put a date that's less than today, equal to today, within 7 days, and more than 7 days from now. And everything's working exactly as planned. Now we're going to go to our Past Invoices tab, select all of column G, go to Conditional Formatting. We'll use the drop-down to select Custom Formula Is, and type equals is blank, open parentheses, G2, close parentheses. And we want the start of the range to match the Apply To range, so I'm going to change the Apply To range to G2, change the background color to none, and then we'll select Add Another Rule. Now we're going to change this custom formula to equals G2 is greater than E2. And we're going to select the background color of red and make the text color white. We'll select Add Another Rule, then change it to less than or equal to, and make it green with the text color of black, then hit done. So we can go ahead and test it out, but in order to do so, we need to bring in a due date. So I'll go ahead and paste one of our due dates there, and then we can type in a payment date. And since the payment date is before the due date, it's green, which means it's working exactly how we want it to. And we can make it where the payment date is after the due date, and it should turn red because we did not pay it on time. So everything's working great. Now we can go ahead and delete those 2 dates since we don't need to use those anymore. And we can go back to the Pending Invoices tab. All right, so from here, there's 2 ways to proceed. One, you can simply put all of your invoices listed on this Pending Invoices tab manually. And if that's the case, you don't need these next 2 tabs. But if you are planning on using a report to automate the addition of each invoice, then you'll want to continue on directly. So we'll add a new tab and rename that to Add, and it is important that it's renamed that. We'll select columns A through F, and then paste that on the To Add column in column A. We'll go ahead and delete this due date since we don't actually need it. And then we're going to right-click on To Add and duplicate it. Right-click on the new tab and rename that as Report. And here is where you import your report details. You'll need the invoice ID, the company, the amount, the invoice date, the due date, and then the description's optional. You can add that later if you want. Now on the To Add column, we're going to set up a formula where it automatically extracts anything that's on the report that is not listed on the Pending Invoices or Past Invoices tab. And we're going to embed this formula into the headers. So in cell A1, we'll type equals, open brace, inside quotes, invoice ID, a semicolon, array formula, open parentheses, filter, A2 colon A, comma, not, open parentheses, count if, open parentheses, open curly brace. We'll go to our Pending Invoices tab and select columns A2 through the end of column A, put a semicolon, go to the Past Invoices tab and select columns A2 through the end of column A, close curly bracket, comma, report, A2 colon A. Then we'll have 4 close parentheses and a close curly brace. And if you did this correctly, you should see anything that's listed on the Report tab automatically populate on the To Add column. And that's because there's nothing listed on the Pending or the Past Invoices tab. So let's test it out. So I'm going to go ahead and add 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5. This really doesn't matter. I'm just adding random numbers at this point. That way we have some data. So now I'll go back to my To Add column, and I can see that it did not populate. So that means we must have an error in the formula. And we do. Instead of it going to A2 colon A from this spreadsheet, I want it to be A2 colon A from the report spreadsheet. So now once we fix that, you'll see that everything automatically populated. So now we need to go to our Pending Invoices tab. Let's put in one of those numbers, and that should disappear automatically from the invoice IDs listed on To Add. And we'll do the same thing for the past invoices. We'll put a different number, and that should also remove automatically from this list that are needed to be added. So now everything's working properly and we're good. All right, so we need to add some more formulas to the To Add tab. But before we do that, to make it easier, we just need to go ahead and add some dummy data into our report. And you don't need to go crazy. All we need is probably 3 or 4 to make sure that we have enough information to test things out sufficiently. So go ahead and put some company information in there. Put the amount. You can go ahead and format that as currency while you're there. Add some invoice dates. You can add some due dates. What I did was I just simply added 60 to all of the dates, then pasted the specials so they became dates. And you don't need any descriptions. Now back on the to add column in cell B1, we're going to type equals, open curly brace, inside quotes, put company, semicolon, array formula, open parentheses, X lookup, A2:A, comma, go back to our report. You can delete if anything populates, then go to A2:A, comma, B2:B. Then we'll need two close parentheses and a close curly brace. And if you press enter, you'll see that we have a bunch of NAs, and that's because there's a lot of items missing. But after the B2:B, we can put a comma, and now it will be blank if there is no value found. Now, I don't want to build this every time, so I'm going to anchor in the A2:A for this spreadsheet as well as the report. And now we can use the fill handle to drag the formula to the right. And we can simply change the name from company to amount, but the return range automatically shifted. And we'll drag that over again. This time we'll change the amount to invoice date. And we'll drag that one over again. We'll change invoice date to due date. And we'll do it one last time. This time we'll change due date to description. All right, so now if anything appears on the report, it will automatically flow through to the to add tab. And you can see here that we have some formatting issues. There's some numbers for the dates. And that's because on the back end, dates are actually formatted as numbers. So all we have to do is change formatting back to their date. And now you'll view the date instead of the number. And if you wanted to, you could go to the 1, 2, 3 and format it that way as well. I don't know why I went the long way. And then we'll go ahead and click on column C and format that back as currency. And if you want to adjust the decimals, you can very easily. But since it's actual currency, we'll leave the 2 decimals. Now going back to our pending invoices tab, I'm going to delete the invoice ID along with the due date. And when I do, the calculation will disappear. And I'm going to delete the invoice ID from the past invoices as well. And now when I go back to the to add column, you'll see that the ones that were originally missing are now present, along with all their correlated info. All right, so now we're going to set up the automation. And whether you're watching this on YouTube, TikTok, or Instagram, you can go to my link in bio to find my website. And up top, you'll see the link to the templates if you want to buy them instead. But we're going to click on App Script. And you'll see 2 different lines that say Invoice Tracker. Those are the 2 codes that we need. So first we'll click on Invoice Tracker - copy pending. And then we're going to click on the copy to copy raw file. Go back to our spreadsheet and go to Extensions App Script. You can delete anything that's previously populated and simply paste the code that you just copied. We'll rename the project. You can rename it whatever you want. I'll just say Invoice Tracker, then hit rename. And then we'll click Save. Now over to the left side, I'm going to click on the plus button. And this will allow me to add a new script. So I'll click on plus, then script. And I'm going to rename this as Move Paid, because that's where we're going to put the new code. So we'll go back to my GitHub, then click on Invoice Tracker - Move Paid, copy the raw file, go back to the app script, delete anything that's currently there, and paste that new code in there, and hit save. Now we need to authorize this code to work, so we'll hit run, and go to Review Permissions, select your account, go to Advanced, go to Invoice Tracker Unsafe, and Allow. And all this is doing is saying that the code is allowed to make the changes to that spreadsheet on your behalf, aka the automation. Now we can go to the other code and press run, and it should automatically work since it now has permissions. Now if you go to the to add column, you'll see that all of the information disappeared. And that's because the first code that we added automatically copies anything on the to add column and pastes it to the next available rows on the pending invoice tab. So it appears to be working properly, but just to show you exactly how the flow works, let's add another line to the report. So we'll do an invoice ID, we'll put test 5, and then we'll put some amount and due dates. And since this invoice is not on the pending invoices or past invoice tab yet, it populates there. And if I go to the app script and click run, it will execute the automation. So now if I go back to my spreadsheet, you'll see that it's no longer on the to add column, and it's in the next line of the pending invoices tab. So from there, you can add any categories that you want. You can also add statuses as pending or hold or whatever you want to do. So I just assign random categories, and I'm going to mark everything in status as pending. Be warned that you do not want to put paid yet, because that is what triggers the automation. So once you mark it as paid, the invoice that you marked as paid should disappear from the pending invoices tab and be added to the next line in the past invoices tab. All right, so we don't want to run this report to bring anything from the to add column to the pending invoices tab. So we're going to go back to app script, go to triggers on the left side. We'll make sure the copy the pending invoices is selected. For select event source, we're going to put time driven. And then here you select the interval that you want to run. I want it to be once a day, so I'll select day timer, and then I'll put it at 7 a.m. You can set it up to notify you daily or weekly or whatever if there's an error, then hit save. Now, one thing to note is it will flag as an error if it's blank because nothing actually happened, but that just could mean that there's no additional invoices to log. Then once you hit save, you'll see the trigger automatically appear right there, so now it's good to go. Now we're going to go back to our pending invoices tab and go ahead and mark everything else as paid. And know that if you go too quickly and you start marking multiple as paid before the previous one gets deleted from the list, it could unsync and copy a wrong row. Now under paid invoices, we're going to select columns A through I, go to Insert Pivot Table, select Existing Sheet, and then we're going to go to our worksheet and select cell C30, then hit Create. We're going to drag the payment date under rows. If you see here, we have payment date 1 day at a time. We just need to right-click that, create pivot date group, and select year and month. So now everything is summarized by the month instead of the date. Next, we're going to select category and drag that under columns. So this will show the date paid by category. Then the amount will go under values. And finally, we want to add the payment date under filter as well. And then we're going to go into the filter and go to filter by condition. Use a drop down to select greater than, then put the number 0 and hit OK. So since we have the payment date filtering by anything greater than 0, anything that is blank will no longer be visible. We're going to uncheck show totals for the category and payment date. And now we're good, we can exit out of the editor. So right now everything has the payment date of September 12th because that's the day that I am doing it and it's adding a timestamp. But I'm going to go ahead and manually update one of these to be October. And you can see that it automatically updates the pivot table. Now I'm going to select the entire pivot table, scroll over to the right side, and in P30, I'm going to paste it. Then we can click the little pencil to edit it. And we're going to get rid of the category. And you can do so by just simply clicking X. And we're going to drag down the company instead. And we'll uncheck show totals. So now we have two pivot tables, one broken up by category and one broken up by company. Now I'm going to select cells C31 all the way through the end of column O. Then I'll go to Insert, Chart. And I'm going to cut this chart and paste it all the way at the top. Now one thing to know, for some reason it doesn't actually cut it and delete it. So we'll scroll down to that chart and press delete. Now we can go back up to the top and edit the one that we are keeping. So we can click on the three dots in the top right hand corner and click Edit Chart. We'll drop down the column chart to be a stacked column chart. And everything's looking good, so we have the category up top and the payment date on the x-axis. Now we're going to go to Customize and select Chart and Axis Title, Chart Title, and put it as Paid Invoices. Then we'll select Chart Subtitle and say By Category. Then we'll use the drop down again to select Horizontal Axis Title. And we'll put Payment, Date, and then we'll use the drop down again to select Vertical Axis Title. And this time we'll put Amount Paid. So now the chart's looking like a chart, so we have everything that we need. And now we can exit out of the chart editor. Now if you look at the y-axis, you'll see that there are no dollar signs next to the amount paid. And that's because it's pulling from the pivot table, and the pivot table has numbers as opposed to currency. But if we select everything and change it to currency, the chart will update automatically as well. So now we have this like we want it, so I'm going to click on the chart, copy it, and paste it over here to the right. And I'm going to drag these and put them in a different position just to make it look a little bit better. Now we'll click on the three dots in the top right hand corner of the new chart to open up the editor. I'm going to select a different date range, so I'll click on the four boxes, clear out the date range, and then click on P31 all the way through the end of column Z. And now once I press OK, instead of the data being based off of the first pivot table, it will be based off the second pivot table instead. But before we see the chart, I want to go ahead and format all of this as currency just like we did before. So now I can go back up to the top and see everything looking exactly how we want. Last thing we need to do is double click on this by category and change it to by company instead. So now I can exit out of the chart editor, and I'm going to drag both of these charts down a little bit so we can add slicers just above them. And if you don't know what a slicer is, it's just a way to have specific filters at a different location than where you would actually normally filter. So I'm going to click on one of the pivot tables, then go to Data, Add a Slicer. And since it's linked to the pivot table, all the different headers that you normally would have for that table that it's based off of will appear on the right-hand side. I'm going to select Company, then copy and paste the slicer, and then I'll select Category. I'll copy and paste the slicer again, and then this time I'm going to select Payment Date. So now all 3 slicers are built that I'm going to add. You can add as many as you like, and I'm going to drag these over to make it centered a little bit more so it looks better. And if you have them equally spaced, you'll see a little line in between show up, and now it's all good to go. So let's test it out by going to Company and selecting one of the different companies. And you should see that both of the charts, as well as all the pivot tables, will only show data that related to that company. Now we can go back into that pivot table and select all. And we can do the same exact thing for any of these. But since we have very limited data, I want to go back in and run the report and add some more data in there. And we might as well test out the whole flow in the process. So I'm going to add some random invoice IDs. I'll put test 5. I want to have the same company as one that I have previously listed so I can test out how the charts look. I'll add a random amount as well as random invoice dates. And I'm going to add a second one as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy everything that's in row 5. And I'm going to change the invoice ID so that way it's unique. Now on my to add column, I'm going to go ahead and run this. And as a reminder, you don't actually need to run this in real time. Since you set up that trigger, it will run once a day for you. But since we want the results now, I'm going to go ahead and hit run, and it will disappear from this list. Go to the Pending Invoices tab. And now all we need to do is assign a category and use one of the categories that you've already selected so that way you can see how the chart will look. The days until due will automatically calculate based off of the due date, and you can add a description if you want. And now we can go ahead and mark both of these as paid to move them to the bottom of the Paid Invoices tab. And the timestamp is going to default to today. Just for example purposes for testing things out, I'm going to change one to next month and change one to last month. So now if I go back to our worksheet, all the pivot tables are added automatically and the charts are updated automatically as well. So now for category, for example, I can select one of the categories, and I'm going to select one of the categories where it has multiple. So I'll select this, and we can see how this category has changed over time. And I can see which companies they're correlated with as well to see if there's any investigation that needs to be done. And I can do the same exact thing for company. So I'll select test 5, for example, and I can see that test 5 has decreased month over month, but they're related to different categories. And you can use both of these filters at the same time to see exactly how a category is changing for a specific company. Now still on the worksheet tab, we're going to select row 30 all the way through the end of the spreadsheet. Right click, view more row actions, group rows, and now you can click on the line to condense them. And as you see, all of our visualizations are gone. But you can select Include Data for All, and now you'll still see everything in the visualizations, whether or not it's visible below. So that's just a good way to keep things clean. If you want to see it again, all you have to do is press the plus button in the bottom left-hand corner, and you can see everything, add more categories, or whatever you need to do. Now we're going to go back to our Past Invoices tab and click just to the left of A and just above 1 to select everything, and then click on Filters. And now if you need to inspect a specific company or anything further, all you have to do is filter and you can see exactly what's going on, all the different amounts, and you can see the descriptions that are input, and that way you can follow up accordingly. So that's everything, and your automated invoice tracker is ready to use. Like and comment for more.